Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I want to talk about a topic, unfiltered. Why do Black Americans embrace Islam in prison? Why do a lot of Black African Americans embrace Islam in prison? And in general, why do a lot of Black people within the US embrace Islam? And this is from my personal opinion on the situation and an unfiltered answer. Now, there are many answers to this particular question that is very commonly heard across the internet or written about in articles or books. Why do African Americans embrace Islam a lot in prison? And in general, why do a lot of African Americans embrace Islam in the US? And I want to give an unfiltered answer, which means it's not going to be the typical answer you're going to hear from an African American Muslim. Now, as Islam have different aspects of the religion when it comes to different branches of knowledge in Islam related to the legislation of Allah, from the Muslim beliefs, from our fiqh or jurisprudence, from the Sirah, from Quran, from tafsir, and so on and so forth. A lot of times when people give answers on why a lot of Black people embrace Islam within the US, especially in prison and in general in the country, you get an answer that's going to typically formulate from derive from one of these particular sections in Islamic science, from the Quran, from Hadith, things like this. But I want to talk from a different aspect today, an unfiltered answer. First, we have to look at what are the situations of Black people within the US. And once we start looking at Black Americans within the US, their condition, we could find that their conditions are not too much far away from the conditions that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and people were upon. It's not too far away, right? When we look at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his people and the conditions that they were in, Black Americans were not too much far away from their conditions, except for that the Arabs were not conquered by anybody. No one really wanted to conquer them, right? They did depend on other governments, right? So the Arabs didn't have a formal government, right? They had their tribal ways of doing things, but there was no really government over them except for Ethiopians, right? So they depended on other governments from other countries around them. And this is where we get into the glimpse in the Sirah of the Prophet. Now, Black Americans, on the other hand, is a totally different situation where we have been conquered over, right? If you look at anybody who conquers another country or another group of people, one of the prizes of conquering over the people that you have prisoners of war, slaves. So Black Americans in this sense had come to America as slaves, prisoner of war, who had no particular rights as prisoner of war. So we've been conquered by one group of people, and we were sent to a foreign country, US. We had no rights. We were treated like we were property, not treated as, but we were property, and we was treated likewise and not like human beings. So in that sense, we have been conquered over. We had no real, what we say, we had no other nation or group of people to fight for us, right? So we have been conquered over by whites, enslaved in the US. and he had no allies, meaning other countries as allies for our freedom. So as conquered people who are conquered, they are oppressed. Basically, they are oppressed people. So Black Americans, when we look at our history in the US, we are oppressed people who've been conquered over, and we had no type of rights. All right? We had no rights at all. So life in America for Blacks was not easy. It's something that we always had to fight and strive for. It's going to go into the next of the main topic, why a lot of Black people in prison embrace Islam. Goes back, we were really prisoners of war. And when we look at the prison industry within the United States of America, the prison industry based its philosophy and it based its structure on incarcerating Black people. All right. And we look into American history when emancipation for Blacks existed, or when emancipation was there, that the races, white races, have found other ways to enslave Black people. And if you look at American Constitution, it never really freed slaves. There's a clause there, right? Unless what? Commit a felony, right? They could be incarcerated, enslaved, right? So they never really abolished slavery in the American Constitution. If you commit a felony, they have the right to enslave you. So we found that when Black people got the emancipation, other white races in American legal system found other ways to enslave Blacks through incarceration. So it's going to go into the question, why do a lot of Black people embrace Islam in prison? Well, we understand that the prison industry philosophy is to incarcerate Black people to keep them from rebelling, keep them from justifying taking what is theirs, their rights from whites. So white people figured out to put them in prison. And we'll find this to this day in 2023 all across US, in many states where Black people are at, like here in New York, where Black people barely make 50% of population, 75% of the prisoners in prison are Blacks, Black Americans, or Black Africans or Afro-Caribbeans. So Blacks are 75% of the people in prison in New York, for example, and we're not 50% of the population. We're barely 50% of the population, but we are the majority in prison. In many states across the US, you will find that Blacks are not the majority in the state, but they are the majority in prison. All across the US, wherever you find Black people at, or cities they reside in, they are going to be the majority in prison, but they're not the majority of the people in that particular state. So prison is by design. That is the philosophy of prison in the United States, is to prevent Black people to excelling. It's to prevent Black people from taking power. White people are not stupid. The racist system, systemic racism, didn't come out of nowhere. It has a purpose for it. Jim Crow has a purpose. Slavery had a purpose. Redlining had a purpose. It's to prevent Black people from responding to the wrongdoing of white people against Blacks. Because any other society that people had conquered over other people, in some of these societies, we look in history, that the people who were oppressed in some form of fashion fought against their oppressor in some form of fashion. Wherever the colonialists went, in some form of fashion, people fought against colonialism. White supremacy in America and the American government is no different. It is no different. So in many societies where the people have been oppressed, they ran out their oppressor, or they turned against their oppressor, or they made allies with other people who had the same common enemy against their oppressors. We look in the United States, we look around the countries around the United States, they even have clear examples of black people, slaves rebelling against the white slave masters and the government. They have clear examples of that in history. Right here in Haiti. Haiti is a good example. Haiti and Jamaica in the Caribbean islands. And not just Haiti, but Haiti is the first country which rebelled against the Europeans and ran them out, which caused other Caribbean countries like Jamaica to do the same. Even Dominican Republic did the same, right? The Haitians helped other revolutions in the Caribbeans and South America. So white people in America, the government, understand these things. Oh, we don't want this to happen in the United States. So let's make sure we keep the black, dark-skinned people, black African descents, foundational black Americans, wherever you want to call it, let's keep them at bay. That's why mass incarceration is going on. That's why blacks are the majority in prison, but not the majority in these particular states, but the majority in prison. This is institutionalized racism or structural racism. It's never going to go away. It's part of the American system. Now, this is going to go back to the question, the unfiltered answer, why a lot of black people are embracing Islam in prison and the US in general, because it is the way to fight against the system. You might not want to understand it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how Allah works, us, mankind, our brains, our human body, our eyes, our five senses have limitations. We have limitations. All human being, black or white, we have limitations. So there are some things that we can't see, right? And some things are spiritual that some of us, we cannot see it, but we might feel it. We might not truly understand it, why it's happening, because it's spiritual and we cannot really we cannot really see it, but we could feel it and somewhat understand what I'm saying. Why a lot of black people are embracing Islam in prison. First is guidance, right? When black people embrace Islam, what's the first thing when a black person or anybody, any nationality embrace Islam? What is the first thing? They free themselves. They free themselves from worshiping other than Allah. So the first thing when a black person, African American or any other nationality, when they embrace Islam, what is the first thing? What is the core of Islam? Tawheed, Islamic monotheism. So for the African American, when he embraces Islam and he say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah, that he bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, the first thing that's recognized against white supremacy is that we're rejecting Jesus, the son of Mary, as God. We are going against the slave master. We're going against the system because this is a Christian country, yes? So that's the first opposition that we are in as a Muslim embracing Islam, as a blacks, that's going to put us against our oppressor. We don't have the same God. We don't worship the same God. We don't worship the same God as they worship because they're not a monotheist belief. They believe in the Trinity. They believe Jesus is a white man. They worship a white man, and they teach black people to worship a white person. So that's why you could find from that black church why they have not really have any impact in the black community except for drowning black people in foolishness and worshiping a white Jewish deity. That's another level. Not just worshiping the white man, but worshiping Jews, because Jesus is a Jew, right? You never found how the black church, some of them have extreme love for Jews, and you don't know why? Well, because the thing that they worship, it's not just white alone, but it's Jesus is a Jew. See what happened now? When you mix in religion, white skin, God being white, and the Jew. So you'll find black churches, they have these extremes with white people because the God they worship is white, and on top of that, a Jew. So the first opposition we are to them, right, is by Tawheed. Tawheed separating the people from the paradise to the people of the hellfire. So we're in a clear opposition against them. Whether you want to recognize it or not, they recognize it. You don't notice when America go attack Islam or attack Muslim countries or something happen and the Muslim gets some victory somewhere, they start looking at Muslims in America, start questioning your patriotism as a Black African American or Latino American or white American. The first thing they start doing is they question are you a patriot to America? They're letting you know their psyche. They're letting you know they see the difference between you and them. It's Tawheed. So when you embrace Islam, the first thing is you're in opposition to your oppressor. This is going to the answer why a lot of Black people embrace Islam in prison. So whether Black people want to recognize, whether there are Black people in prison, that they are in the opposition to their oppressor. The oppressor putting them in prison for a reason. Well, people will say, well, they're criminals. They're doing things against the law. Well, for sure, if the government, through Jim Crow, redlining, segregation, and other forms of systemic racism that prevent Black people from getting finances and economics, that's what slavery was about. Slavery was about white people getting economics for white people. Slavery was not about Black people getting economics for Black people. It's for white people to get economics, making money from free slave labor without without giving their slaves money for the work. That's what slavery was about. So white people got rich from oppressing Black people. So it's about money and finances. It's about economics. So the white man figured after emancipation how to keep Black people from what? Getting economics. Because once you have economics, then you have a voice because you have power. The next wisdom of why a lot of Black people embrace Islam in prison or in America in general, one is Tawheed. The first reason is Tawheed, Islamic monotheism, which breaks you away from your oppressor's beliefs. The second reason is unity based on a faith that is in the opposition to your oppressor. See, Black people, we don't see the wisdom in these things. We don't see the wisdom in these things. See the wisdom in these things? Unity, where Black people today in America, we don't have unity. All right? So Islam first takes you away from the beliefs of your oppressor by the worship of God without associate partners with him, meaning that we don't believe God is white, a man named Jesus. We're not worshiping the same deity, or we're not worshiping the same God of our oppressors. We are on Tawheed. Then after that, unity. Unity based on what? Unity based on the teachings of Islam. And with the teachings of Islam, what does the teaching of Islam teach us? وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِاللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hey, that's the core. That's one of the core things of Islam. Hold on to the rope of Allah and be not divided. That is the core thing of Islam. What we say in Salat, Surah Al-Fatiha, right? إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. We alone worship you. So Islam is bringing us together. We are worshiping Allah, not us as individuals. Even though African American Muslims have Eurocentric practices and behaviors with them. Individualism. Even that's what I'm, always bring up these topics about working together so we could break out of the psyche of the slave mind. We could break out of the psyche of colonialism. Islam breaks you out the psyche of colonialism. So Islam teaches us to work together. Where in white supremacy in American construction of white supremacy, oppressing black people, so white people will always have the upper hand, no matter what is their number. Islam is teaching its followers what? To work together. So black people, we have the education of the Eurocentric, the education from the Eurocentric for its subjects, meaning subordinates, that keep them in place and obeying the order or the government. Keep them obeying the government, meaning white structure, and do things that benefit the white structure. So we get the education of the Eurocentric have for its subordinates, which means we're going to do things that's going to promote white supremacy to keep them in power. So Islam is teaching, whether you want to accept it or not, as you working together. وَاعْتَصِمُوا حَبْلَ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَإِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Surah Asr, right? Allah says everybody's in loss, except for those who believe and do righteous actions, right? Allah is talking about, we read Surah Asr, even the word, how it's formed in this surah, some of the verbs, it means that you do things together, mutually together. Everywhere in Quran, we have this form of verb. وَاعْتَصِمُوا وَحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah and be not divided. All right? Help each other in bir and taqwa, and piety and taqwa. And do not help each other in transgressing. Even the word, how it's formed in Arabic, the verbs, is meaning that you do things mutually together. So here in Islam, it is refuting colonialist or Eurocentric individualism and teaching its followers to work as a collective. It's teaching its followers to do what? Work collectively. African Americans, we notice we cannot work collectively. We're always working against each other. What Islam is giving us the discipline. It's teaching you how to work together. Everywhere in the Quran, everywhere in the Sirah, everywhere in the fiqh, in Islamic jurisprudence. Salah. Salat is prayed what? For the men in congregation. All Muslims pray 5 prayers a day. All Muslims face the same Qibla. All Muslims fast the same month during the same specific hours of the fast. Yes, collectively, we break our fast collectively. For Eid, we make Hajj in the same season. Everything in Islam is Muslims working together. Every individual is working together as a collective. That's why America government don't like Islam, because it teach Muslims how to work together. And to working together means also part of Islam is governing together, fighting together, eating together, fasting together, praying together, and fighting your enemies together. That's the wisdom in it. That's why they don't like Islam. That's why. It teaches them, everyone, whoever embrace it, to work together. Ah, look in the history of Islam, wherever Muslim nations, wherever the colonialists went, wherever the Europeans or America went to fight, the people, the Muslims, even though they had hypocrites and monafics and traitors, the majority of the bulk of the Muslims still work together against their opponents. That's why Taliban is back in Afghanistan. It's a great example. Why Taliban? America was in what, Afghanistan, what, 20 years? And they had to pull out, getting too expensive for them. When the Russians invaded the Afghanis, look how many Muslims came together to fight against the Russians. All the Muslims from all over the world went to help the Afghans. See, there's wisdom in Islam, but a lot of the African Americans don't see it, even though they embrace Islam. Because we have not removed that slave mentality, or just like we have not removed for our foreign brothers, they have not removed the colonialist mentality. So why a lot of black people embrace Islam? Allah guides who he wills, and the law misguide who he wills. Allah guide who he will to the truth. And the law listen to supplications of oppressed people. And if you study the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even amongst the Arabs, they were even oppressing each other themselves, and the law gave them Islam. And then when the Muslims were strong in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what other countries came into Islam during the life of the Prophet? The Muslims fought the Romans, the Persians, and the Egyptians. I'm sorry, the Romans. And when they went to Egypt, who helped the Muslims in Egypt? Who helped the Muslims in Egypt? Who helped the Muslims in Egypt? The oppressed people of Egypt. Well, the government in Egypt at the time, the Romans looked down at. They helped the Muslims invade. And these people eventually became Muslim. Wherever there's oppressed peoples, Allah gives them some form of hidayah, some form of guidance. If they want to accept it or not, that's on them. But Allah sends them guidance, because within the guidance of Islam, it is the remedy for their oppression, or it's the means to get them out their oppressive state. That's why a lot of black people embrace Islam in prison, because it's a means for them to get out of their oppressive state. First, out of the oppressive state of mind, worshiping other than the law, and removing themselves from worshiping the same thing their oppressors are worshiping. Which means a lot of black African American Christians, they're still relating to white supremacy, because the white supremacy believe in Jesus, and Jesus is God and the white man, and the African American Christians believe the same into the same deity. So they think white people are divine because Jesus is white, so he's divine, so white people must be divine. Black people lost their mind over Jews in Israel, have family members who are black. Every day they talk about Israel. So Israel don't care nothing about you except for your money. Whatever money you could donate to them as a Christian. They don't believe in Jesus, the son of Mary. They don't believe he's the Messiah. So why are you extreme? And according to the Christian beliefs, the Jews are the one who had Jesus killed. So why are you extreme with Jews? Because you worship a white deity that is Jewish. So you don't see the psychology of when you worship things other than God, you start having the love for them. When you start making God as a color or a human being and having being from a certain race, then you start thinking that race is divine and perfect. So the first thing Islam does is get you out the mindset of your oppressor, but stop worshiping the deity that they are worshiping. Then the next move Islam does for the fa'idah it does for you that you don't know as a Muslim, it teaches you to work together collectively. But that's where Black African American Muslims are struggling at right now, because they've been for a long time programmed through white supremacy. They've been programmed through white supremacy, and white supremacy from its educational school system is to do things individually that don't help your Black people collectively. So you will do things that help the system keep it going. Even if you're very educated, then you get education in America, you go to their school, and if you're very smart in school, you go work for one of their white companies or one of the white people who benefits from structural racism and white supremacy in America. You go as a Black person work for that company to make them more rich, but you don't work for your own peoples or your own self or your own peoples to be financially independent from these peoples. You become dependent on the white structure for a job and money. So you still are a slave to the system. Islam teaches Black people to work for self, do for self, work collectively, and don't depend or be dependent on your oppressor. And for the final, which the government, why the government in the United States will always spy on Muslims, probably even watching my video right now, while the government always spy on a Muslim, because Islam would teach you where you don't need to go to no big university for it. Islam teach you by its basic principles from the Quran and from the Hadith and from the Sunnah. It teach you how to govern. It teach Muslims how to govern. And that's what white supremacy government in America fear the most from Islam. You never watch like programs from the government that talks about how to change the Muslims' thinking, how to make them more liberals, how to make them homosexual, how to get their children, how to get the women, Muslim women out of hijab. They don't want you to follow the Quran and Sunnah. They don't want you to follow your religious practice, because they understand that as long as you're going to hold on to Islam, its correct teachings, it's teaching you how to govern. And that's a threat to the United States. A religion that teaches you how to govern, Christianity, don't teach Christians how to govern. That's why you notice Christians don't know nothing about government structure unless they go to the secular universities to learn about government and structure. Islam teaches you from the Sharia law, Islamic jurisprudence, that teach you how to pray and make wudu, how to wash up for the prayer, what breaks your purity, what breaks your tahara. Islam teaches you how to govern. It doesn't teach you just how to pray. It teaches you how to govern your life and govern a government, govern your family, govern your life, and govern a country. It teaches all those things. How to govern a government, how to govern your own life, how to govern your children, how to govern your family, how to govern your mosque, how to govern this, how to govern your economics. Islam teaches all of that. So it teaches you how to govern a country. That's a threat. So they will always monitor and watch Muslims in the United States because it's a threat. A religion that teaches you how it teaches how to, a structural government, how it should be according to pleasing God. And it's teaching you a government so you could please God. It's a form of worshiping. The way you govern from Quran and Sunnah is worship in Islam. Following laws that Allah gave is worship in Islam. So for example, Islam prohibits drinking alcohol. That means that alcohol and drugs are not going to be allowed in the Muslim government. For example, abortions. You cannot kill or abort your babies because you fear poverty, you want to have them. Fornicating is illegal. Homosexuality, it's illegal. Sex outside of marriage, it's illegal, right? Capitalism, interest, it's haram in Islam, so it's going to be illegal in the Muslim government, for example, right? All these things are part of Islam, right? All these things I have mentioned, these laws is part of Islam. How to govern the society is going to make a God-fearing nation and people. A God-fearing nation and people. Worshiping the law. So Islamic law is worship itself. So it goes back to the original statement. Why black people embrace Islam a lot in prison? Because it's a form of discipline that they're going to need. It's a spiritual form of discipline they need. And it is a religious discipline, which is spiritual, and it's a discipline that they need to change their life and to change their community where they come from. Why black people in America embrace Islam? For the same reason. It's a discipline, religious discipline for them. And it's getting them away from their oppressors' worship, what they're worshiping. We don't worship what they worship. So it's detaching us away from our oppressor religiously. Even though in Islam, we're going to ask our oppressor to embrace Islam. In Islam, you invite that. Right? So here you might find in one community, people with different nationalities, white people and black people, right? And some white people know the American government is against black people. So if that white person becomes Muslim and that black person becomes Muslim, that all of them are going to be brothers in Islam, right? But a lot of people who hate Islam, especially from the government level, who spying on Muslims, they make it appear it's terrorism that is the fearful things from the Muslims. Oh, no, it's not terrorism. Because Muslims, Islam doesn't promote suicide, bombing, killing women and children, none of these things. That's what they feed. That's what the government feeds through the media to white America, to make them also don't accept this. That's what the government feeds through the white media. So white people don't embrace Islam. It is the the boogeyman religion. It feed that to the mass white people who watch the media. See, the government already understand black folks, a lot of black folks. Whatever they put in the media, a lot of black folks are going to believe it. That's why blacks, we have the self-hate, right? The white man ice in his store is colder than the black man ice in his store. It's, the ice is ice. So you understand that some black folks are going to believe whatever they put in the media, but the media, the news is designed, the media is designed to give news, particular news, specific news to only white folks. They already know black people want to follow by design. But it's made to make sure that its white population get this misinformation about Islam. But alhamdulillah, through the grace of Allah, they could plot and plan, but Allah is the best of planners. Allah is the best of planners. So that's my unfiltered answer why a lot of black people embrace Islam in prison and in the US. There's a lot more to this subject. But I wanted to say this because some black folks, we need to start thinking. A lot of us, we don't have a lot of critical thinking. We're not critical. We don't have like serious critical thinking in these areas. We don't see the nitma in this. We don't see the nitma. Some of us, the things I mentioned, some of our people who are Muslim, they don't see that. The first thing that Islam does is take you away from the beliefs of your oppressor in this country. You're not worshiping the same deity they're worshiping, right? And we understand as black folks or non-white people, when you're worshiping a white deity, then you're going to see white people as divine. And you're not going to question anything they do because you're busy worshiping these people. Islam take you out of that darkness and bring you into the light. Islam take you out that darkness and bring you to the light of Islam, which is Islamic monotheism, worshiping Allah, Him alone. La sharika lahu. There's no partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No sons, no daughters, no one on his level, no one on his right side, his left side. No. We don't believe in the things that the people associate with Allah. We don't believe in it. So Islam takes you first, what? Out of the darkness into the light. Take you from polytheist belief to monotheist beliefs. Trinity is polytheism. It's not monotheism. You can never make three into one. It takes you away from the beliefs of your oppressor. The same government, the same legal system that's oppressing you, Islam take you first away from worshiping them. In reality, not just worshiping Jesus, you're worshiping them. You're worshiping white people. That's why white people have been in the position they are in for a long time, because all the people they conquer over, and enslavement is conquering over. All the people they conquer over, they notice they give them their religion and they make their deity white. And then the non-white people start worshiping this white deity and start worshiping their system. So they're 100% not going to challenge them. Once you're worshiping your oppressors, you're not going to challenge them. You might have symptoms of showing displeasures with things they do against you, but you're not going to take up arms and fight against them. You might voice your opinion, but you're not going to take up arms to fight against them because you're worshiping them. You might show that you're upset with their treatment against you because your skin color, and you hope that the people you're worshiping will embrace you. But you're not going to take arms against them. You're not going to remove them out of power. That's why Islam always will be a threat in America. Will always be a threat in America. And the reason why I made this video today, because I was here in New York. I want to show you guys, I've been seeing this ad on the trains lately, right? Let me see, can I upload this ad? There's a Muslim marriage/dating app, right? I've been seeing on the trains everywhere here in New York. All right. I want to upload 2 of them, right? And I was like, these ads on the subways in New York are very expensive, right? I want to show one of them. I think this one is a little bit more clear, right? The answer to your mom's dua. The app is called Salams, the best rated Muslim marriage app, right? And this one is said, half your deen doesn't have to take half your life, right? And I was looking at this app, right? I'm seeing these advertisements everywhere on the trains here in New York. And I was like, let me download this app. I download the app. Since I've seen the ads everywhere, they ask like hundreds of personal information about yourself. And they claim that the more information you put into the app about yourself, your beliefs, what type of Muslim do you pray 5 times a day, what type of college you have, about your parents, about where you live, about your location, about where you go to. They have over hundreds of questions they ask, right? And I'm like, this don't sound like no marriage app. This sounds like a collecting data on information. And by having an app with an advertisement like this for marriage, for sure Muslims are going to download it. And now with that Muslim Pro app that they found out, the Muslim Pro app for the Salat, that the company sold it to a U.S. military, that they're collecting data on Muslims. When I seen this app and I went and download, I seen hundreds of questions. It was so many questions. I was like, this is not a marriage app. This is collecting information about individual Muslims, your preference, your food color, your books, where you go, where you hang out, where you eat at, where you go to, this and this and that. Why a marriage app needs all this information? Because they want to collect data on Muslims. This is the way to collect data on Muslims. So no matter what they do in this, no matter what we do in this country, oh, I see, this my theory. They're always going to be collecting information and data on Muslims because you're always going to be a threat. I always tell people, right, in America, who ask me about being Muslim, I said, in America, I have 2 strikes against me. Actually, I have 3 strikes against me. In America, Black people who are Muslim, you have 2 strikes against you. Number one, they don't like you. The government don't like you because you're a Black. Number 2, they don't like you when they find out you're Muslim. They have an extra hatred for you because they understand, in America, the government understands that Black people have a legitimate reason why to be angry with this government because of structural racism. George Floyd is very clear that the government have not changed. George Floyd incident. The government has not changed. The white supremacy and hatred for Blacks have not changed. And when the government see a Black person who's Muslim, they're like extra scared. They're extra cautious around these people. That's why they probably watching my video right now. Extra cautious because Black people have a legitimate excuse to be angry with white people, the government system. The government in America is not a Black government. It is a white government. It's to protect white people's interests, not Black people. If you find or look anywhere, like I said, mass incarceration, Black people in many particular states are not even 50%, but they're the majority in prison. This is not by coincidence. This is by design. So when they see Black people embracing Islam, they get scared because they see historically in the Muslim world, wherever the colonialists and Europeans went, the Muslims gave them hell. The Muslims fought them. The Muslims fought them. The Muslims fought them. When they came in for the Crusades from Europe to take up the Holy Land, the Muslims fought them. Took them a long time. Muslims fought them. When they went to Afghanistan, the Muslims fought them. When it was in Desert Storm, the Muslims fought them. Even Saddam, who was off and lost, the Muslims still fought them. Wherever they go, the colonialists go to exploit the people or steal their resources, the Muslims fight them. Israel, the Muslims fight them, even though they are the minorities. The Muslims fighting them. They don't have the same arms. They don't have the sophisticated weapons as the Jews. The Muslims fight them. Wherever white people go to oppress people, Muslims will fight them. Muslims will fight them. So they're always going to look at you if you're Muslim. If you're African American Muslim, they're going to look at you more because they understand Black peoples. By design, your nature should be to rebel, or your nature should be to repel the racism that are coming from them against you, and that's affecting your people, your livelihood, your family, your children, your mental health, your finances, your safety. Your natural instinct should be to rebel or to repel it. That should be your natural instinct. We understand Black people in America are scared. The Muslims are not scared. The Muslims are not scared against them. The Muslims are not scared. Go look up those stories from American soldiers when they was in Iraq, when they was in Afghanistan, about those Muslims who were fighting them in these countries. These one Muslim who didn't have the same type of military equipment was giving them hell, was giving those people, those soldiers hell in some cases. Go look about Fallujah in Iraq. Go read the stories on YouTube about Fallujah in Iraq, even though they lost. And that's where American was using chemical weapons on them because they was kicking them Americans' asses. So they start using the Americans was using chemical weapons on these people. Wherever they go, the Muslims just not going to give it up to them. They're not giving it up to them. They're going to have to fight to take whatever they want from them. They're going to have to fight to take whatever they want from them. So when you see the African American Muslim, he comes to Islam, the first thing in their mind, oh man, I hope they don't link up with peoples like this. I hope they don't learn these type of things, because these peoples are trained in fighting and they don't give up their land. They're not easy to do. You ever see these fictional movies? Let me see which one. Fictional movies like cartoonic, or movies or sci-fi like here Star Wars, where the Jedi was used a mind trick on weak soldiers, you know, they say something to them to make them do whatever the Jedi want them to do, right? The mind trick, right? U.S. government have these mind tricks on black folks, but with the Islam, you could see it, and it doesn't work well on African American Muslims. It don't work well. These mind tricks are going to work on that other average black person. Some of them, not all of them, because black people now are starting to wake up in this country. They're starting to wake up in this country. You know, I heard a YouTuber, I think last month, a black YouTuber, I don't want to say his name, but he talks about black social issues in America and the African diaspora. And he's mentioning, what if black people in America embrace Islam? We won't be experiencing what black people in America are experiencing today. A black YouTuber who was very popular on YouTube said this. He said, if black people in America embrace Islam, would they be going through what they're going through today? Because this gentleman, he travels to Muslim countries to do business, and he see in the news and politics that the Muslims are not bending over to American policies. They're not bending over to it. And he said, imagine if black people in America have embraced Islam, would our experience in America be any different? You know, coons are always going to be a coons. We have coons in the Muslim community, African American Muslim community. But yeah, our situation would be a lot different because we won't be easily bending over to these people. This is look at Imam Jamil Al-Amin. Why did the government lock up Imam Jamil Al-Amin? Why did they set him up? He's a threat. He's a threat. Anybody who can organize people, black people, are a threat. Anybody, whatever their faith is, whatever their religion is, any black person who can organize black people is a threat. It's a threat. But some black groups are not a threat, because if they still worshiping that white deity, they can always be manipulated. They can always find some spy, somebody, a traitor within the ranks who's still in love with white people because the deity they worship is a white man. That's how they set up Martin Luther King Jr. We know that's reality. Martin Luther King Jr., we understand the government assassinated, but best believe somebody in the inside with Martin Luther King Jr. gave him up, also helped them assassinate him. Best believe that. Best believe that. All right, so I'm out of here. I'm about to make my 1 hour mark on this video, but I just want to drop that out there. I think for Muslims, for my closing, I think that African American Muslims, we need to start promoting Islam more in these days and ages. And we need to start learning our religion properly. We need to start learning about our belief system and Islamic jurisprudence. We need to start understanding Islamic fiqh, Islamic law, to deal with a lot of the social issues that's going on, but to repel, to remove that colonial white supremacist mindsetting that we have, because we have the psyche of the victims of white supremacy. We have the mind setting through the school structure, the educational school structure that was designed to make black people more submissive and subordinate to white supremacy structure. We need to start removing these things from ourselves. And Islam is a good way to expel Islamic teachings from Quran and Sunnah. I'm not talking about just reading, picking up a book and reading a book. Islamic teachings from Quran and Sunnah will help repel all these things going on today. All the things that they're throwing at black people to entrap us into not working together or collectively or our thinking, it will help remove some of the things. But it's going to be on us individually to educate ourselves so we could collectively come together. Black people issue right now, collectively, African American Muslims issue today, collectively, we're not doing what we're supposed to do according to Quran and Sunnah about working together in our communities and fixing things. We are off. We are off. We still have the mind setting of the enslaved. We're still fighting in the African American Muslim community because it's plantation politics, as a sister explained to me, one of my guests on my show. He said black people still have a lot of plantation politics. So we haven't 100% removed this slave mentality where we acting in a way that was designed for us not to work together. We still have this amongst African American Muslims because we still have the mindsetting of the slave. So we need to start looking and the Quranic solutions for all these issues. If you like this video, please click like and share. It do help spread the video when you click like and you share it. And if you want to hear anything else, you can always follow me on my website, which is in the description of the video. Thank you.